And so you tell stories.
Yeah, it's stories about just about everything on a network that's a storytelling network. We had a couple of very lucky breaks. A few high net worth people said, wow, you want to be an alternative to NPR and tell stories that aren't as weepy, stories that are more, I just want to call them more Americana, and more stories that the folks really extol the virtues of America. I find that when I listen to NPR, it feels a lot like the grievance sort of crying radio, and it's not the America I know. And I've known a lot of people in very difficult circumstances who've triumphed over those circumstances. So we try and tell a lot of positive stories and a lot of beautiful stories about what Americans do in their everyday life. And from small town America to big cities, the show started with one affiliate almost 2 years ago, and we're going to hit our 100th, I think, somewhere in mid-January. And it's not little markets. It's Atlanta and it's Tampa, and there's lots of little markets too. But we're now in San Francisco, and just places I would have never expected, actually. And it's growing as fast as any show I've ever done. And I've been involved with 6 of the top 20 shows in the country. And we never mention Donald Trump. We never mention Barack Obama. There's no screaming. There's no yelling. And there's no opinions. We basically let people tell their stories. And every kind of story, and we love telling stories about history. So we do a This Day in History every day. And so we'll tell stories about everything from Wilt Chamberlain scoring 100 points and forcing the league to change its rules because he would just lean over and dunk the ball. So when you see the NBA lane wider than a high school lane and you see that extra stripe, that's the Wilt rule. Wilt Chamberlain changed that rule.
Oh, wow.
He was such a dominant force. Nobody's scored 100 points since him, and no one probably will because they changed that rule. So it's interesting. We spent an hour with David McCullough, and every year on the day that the Wright brothers were born and died, we run an hour on the Wright brothers. We run an hour on Henry Ford. Henry Ford is the most amazing life story. And it's the story of American innovation. It's the story of American self-help. It's the story of American entrepreneurship. And Henry Ford grew up on a farm, hated the farm, did not want to stay on the farm. Lots of kids, by the way, don't want to take the family farm over. They don't want to see another corn crop. They don't want to see another soybean. They don't like the life. Some do, but some don't. Well, back then, you didn't have much of a choice. You were either going to work on the farm or not work at all, because there weren't cities and there weren't as many. So Ford had an idea and he started playing with engines. And he became a world-class race car driver because he just wanted to get the heck out of the farm and go to cities. But then he had a passion for creating cars that ordinary people could afford, because at the time the only people who could afford cars were wealthy people. And through his assembly line, through the moving assembly line, which was his innovation that he stole from watching, slaughterhouses. He studied slaughterhouses, and then, so we're telling the story about how he came up with his innovations.
Right.
And how he brought the average car's price down within reach of the ordinary American, who could then decide, I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to go and I'm going to leave this farm and I'm never coming back. And some people decided to do that. And I love this country because some people could say, I want to live in the big city. God bless. Other people say, I want to live in the suburb. God bless. And other people say, I want to live in a little patch of earth and farm. God bless. It's the choice. Let Birmingham be Birmingham. Let Berkeley be Berkeley. I love the differences. Some of us want to live in one place, some in another place. And I love the diversity of options in the country. And a guy like Henry Ford is a fundamental part of creating all the freedoms we have today and creating the affordable car. And by the way, he got rich creating a product that made cars affordable to people.
Right.
So this is the really remarkable. How wealth is created is the other thing kids don't know. And so they don't know what creates jobs, where capital comes from, how capital works, how free enterprise works, and what real socialism looks like and feels like, and what the consequences of the government running industry as opposed to the industry running itself. Little supervision from the government to make sure there aren't crooks and cheats around. Right. But then a taxation system that allows our country to innovate and develop new products, as opposed to some other country that might get that better. And if we don't win that fight, I think those are the new wars of the 21st century, is getting our economics right, training up our people right to work, be prepared to work, and be productive members of society. And if we get that right, we've got another great 100 years ahead of us. And if we get that wrong, other countries are going to take us by storm. And I think those are the big fights today, I think politically, and I think personally. Who decides and who pays? These are big things to me, whether it's small town America and your local city government, your state legislature, and then your federal government. Who decides and who pays? Those are big deciding factors in a lot of the stories we do that are on the policy side. But only We only tell stories. We don't tell people how to decide. There's no opinions. There's no PhDs or pundits.
Yeah.
No famous. Our favorite story of the last 6 months was telling stories about homeowners in Illinois whose property taxes are now more than their mortgage payments. And when they originally bought their houses, their mortgage payments were higher and their property taxes were just a little bit of their nut. Now it's turning out that a lot of people who've actually paid off their houses can't afford to live in them because they can't afford to pay the taxes. So imagine you thought you were done with the bank, and then the town just keeps raising taxes. It happened to my dad. He actually had to sell his house because the tax bill was just too high. And so he ended up selling because it was coming right at $15,000. And by the way, with no end in sight to $20,000. Meanwhile, he's on a fixed income with a little bit of cost of living adjustment. And so essentially a house he'd paid off years ago was not his house. The state of New Jersey and the town of Dumont, New Jersey were co-owners. And they were knocking on the door regularly to say, you know, John, we need a little more this year. You know, John, I know you paid off the house, but we need even more. It's for the kids. It's for the retired teachers. It's for the retired firefighters. It's for the retired this. And my dad's going, I have no money left for the retired me. Who negotiated those deals?
Right.
Why are those people able to make more than me while they work and then have better benefits than private citizens? When did it happen that the people who serve the people make more money than the people who are paying the taxes and have much better pensions? In New Jersey, it is routine to have public pensions where people are making $75,000 to $100,000 for the rest of their life. And then they get defined benefit plans which say 0 copay and 0 on medicine. Nobody in America has that plan in the private sector. We're all paying 20 or 25%. The people who work for us in the government have to have the same plans we do. Maybe even a little less because they're public servants, but certainly not more. So in states like New Jersey and Illinois, we're telling stories about people in those states and why they're moving. Because those are the two states with the most net outflow. Those are the states with the most people leaving and the fewest people coming.
How can the people stop stuff like that?
They can look. The state of Wisconsin did it. The state of Wisconsin ultimately really tried to attack the public pension deals that were cut. They said, you know what? A small fraction of our state is eating up a large fraction of our budget. That's wrong. And they're fixing it. It's up to the people. When the people figure the reason a lot of businesses are coming to the South, one of the reasons I came to Mississippi, we have really good books here. Mm-hmm. The state does not have a ton of debt. And I think a few decisions are made on the education space, especially in technical and vocational education, and the right kind of leadership. I think this state could be a leader. In about a 10-year turnaround, this state could really be attracting a lot of capital and a lot of people to move here if we get some things right, because I don't think the state has an appetite for large public sector unions, let alone unions overtaking the auto plants that have moved here. We've had a couple. We have one right down the road in Tupelo. And if you would have told William Faulkner in 1962 when he was wandering around here that there'd be an auto plant, and it would be a Japanese auto plant in Tupelo, he would have laughed at you. Yeah. And I said, that's progress, sir. You write about the past, and you say it never passes, but it does. And Faulkner's got that famous quote, the past isn't past, it's not. The past isn't dead, it isn't even past yet. Well, I actually see the future here in Mississippi, and it's interesting to look at the past, but I don't want to be a prisoner of the past. And I think a lot of people who are moving here are bringing that fresh insight to the state. And we're just saying, look, some bad things happened in the past. Some bad things happened in this country in the past. The bad things happened in the world in the past. We are way beyond it. Are we perfect? No. Is any place perfect? Absolutely not. But are we moving forward? You betcha. Now, why are you stuck in that place 7 months out of the year talking about it? What's your agenda? For beating me over the head with this stuff? I really want to understand that. I want to say that to a lot of the professors at Ole Miss. Why are you constantly bringing my child back to the 1960s? And by the way, why not back to the 1940s? All of America watched our boys do the Bataan Death March and die. All of our people saw the Holocaust. They're spending no time on these seminal events, world events, proving that human beings have been evil to human beings forever. Yeah. It's not an American trait. Africans have been selling their people into slavery. The Chinese have enslaved their people. The Russians have enslaved their people. Only in this country did the people get to march and petition and create human freedom. Were we slow? You bet. Was slavery an original sin? Absolutely. Did we fix it? We fought a war over it, for goodness sake, and we fixed it. Is it perfect? No. But my goodness, you talk to people from Kenya, Kenya, Nigeria, the African diaspora that's coming here, they love this country. They think it's just filled with opportunities. And I think that's an interesting way to think about race and class going forward. These people are getting right out of poverty in no time, because they're not stuck in this paradigm that somehow this is a horrible, evil, racist country. Because it's just not true. Are there racists? You bet. No kidding.
It's human nature.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
And by the way, as an Arab kid and with an Arab last name, I used to hear it. Oh, Arab, we go wash your head in camel pee. And I mean, I heard terrible things. But you know what my parents told me? I don't want to hear about it. Get used to it. It's okay. It's one jerk. And if you pay that jerk too much attention, you're letting him own you. Ignore him. Move on to the next thing, son. What great advice for a kid. And then I got to see the world as it was. Most people accepted me and adopted me despite the weird sounding last name and the weird ethnic heritage. But if I had wanted to make a point at it, I could have been the kid with my hand fist up in the air talking about social justice because someone made an Arab joke.
Right.
Get a helmet. By the way, it's good for your self-esteem. And by the way, I befriended a lot of those people. I made a point to get to know them better and to let them know, A, that I wish they wouldn't have said that. But, you know, I get it. And by the way, I've probably cracked a Polish joke in my life. But let's break bread together. Let's get to know one another. So I think that kind of sensitivity it's not productive for anybody. Now, if it gets into viciousness, if it gets into me not being able to get a job, it starts to be real economic punishment, like what's happening to women today. What we're learning, what some men have been doing to women on the workplace, despicable, unlawful. But if a guy asks a girl out on a date at the workplace, is that harassment? And what we want to fix this thing, but don't overfix it. Right. Be careful, and not every single incident is the same. What Matt Lauer did is not the same thing as what Al Franken did. I'm actually writing a piece right now, in the middle of writing a piece in defense of Al Franken. And I don't agree with him politically, but I don't think the guy should retire. I think he did some really silly, goofy stuff, but it wasn't to the grade of fireable offense. Right. We got to get punishments that fit the crimes. This is very important in American justice. And we shouldn't just run people out without due process, without a hearing. The Duke Gregg case is enough for everybody to know that the accused has rights and the accuser has rights. And there's a thing called due process. Exactly. And that's the most important thing. Let's settle this out and see what happened. And then when we find out what's happened, let's not treat every grievance and every offense the same. Because some are low-level offenses that deserve a reprimand and maybe a little counseling, and others deserve jail. And we got to sort that out. They're not all the same. I'm happy it's all happening, though, because for women in the workplace who've had to endure monsters, they've got a lot of courage to speak out. And there's a reckoning to pay for those monsters and all the silence that's around some people who did some really bad things. Yeah. I think those days are over. I hope so. And never perfect. I mean, the monsters will always be here, just like the murderers will always be here, and the rapists. I mean, they're here. They're vile, and they're mostly men. There are not a lot of female rapists. This is just a biological and genetic fact, and people have to get over it. And we got to figure out how to either control those men or put them away for a very long time, because they're dangerous.
How did the name Salem Radio come about? Or
the Salem Radio Network is Salem and Shalom are two words that sort of pull out of the Judeo-Christian heritage and the Bible. So my parent company that I work for wanted that sort of nod to biblical history, because in the end, the private company I work for every day is the biggest Christian radio broadcaster in the country by far. We own a lot of big Christian websites, crosswalks.com, Christianity.com, many others, GodTube we bought APR. Recently. No, APR is the nonprofit that I run that does all the storytelling. Salem is where Salem sort of is my day job, and that's where I still work from Oxford, but I work for them on their radio division with five of their big national hosts, and they have 5 of the top 20 national hosts, and guys like Dennis Prager, who runs Prager University, is one of our hosts, and Michael Medved, who regularly writes for USA Today, and Mike Gallagher, who's a regular Fox contributor, and Larry Elder, who's a regular Fox contributor. So I mean, our lineup is what I run during the day, and then I have a full-time staff here that then I come in at night and record our stories that then go out every day to national affiliates all around the country.
Okay.
So Salem's the day job. It's a publicly traded company that's in the private sector, and then APR and Our American Stories are our first show, which is sort of an NPR alternative to This American Life, which is a very popular NPR show. It tends to almost always lean to the, let's just say, to the left in terms of political spectrum. And we want to sort of more lean to the right in terms of our curation of stories and what appeals to us as opposed to what appeals to them. And that's APR and Our American Stories. That's a nonprofit.
Have you done a story on all the founding fathers?
Not yet, but we've done quite a few, and we plan on doing all of them. So that's a great question, and we're also going to be doing a story on a long form story on the Constitution we're in construction of right now, a 10-part series on the Constitution itself, why it came about, what problem it was trying to solve, who did the solving, what were the real battles, what were the compromises, and where did it lead to? And then what did other countries do as they watched this? Because never before in human history had anything like this been done. I mean, we stole some ideas from the British, but my goodness, they had a monarchy over there, so it's slightly different. And even the way they organize politically is very different in terms of how they self-govern. But this is an experiment in self-governance the world has never seen.
And the justice system was taken a little bit from that area, but it was more open and it seemed a bit more fair than what the British had.
Well, the British had, their common law we took a lot from, the idea of natural rights and some of the great British writers we took from, but ultimately, and a lot of our criminal code came from that, but our Bill of Rights is very unique. And it basically says, and I try to tell people all the time, what the Bill of Rights really says is, I don't care if 100% of the people in Oxford or the state of Mississippi or the country don't like what I'm talking about. I have a right to free speech, and you can't take that right away from me. The government cannot inhibit. Now, in the private sector, the discussion of whether an athlete has a right to get on his knee and speak, well, he has a right to, but his employer has a right to terminate his employment. If you're working for UPS, you cannot walk up to a door in which there's a political sign in the front and then give that customer a piece of your political mind. You'll get a piece of red paper saying you're fired. So you have free speech rights. The government can't infringe upon them, but private people can. So if I don't like what you're saying, for instance, and you host a show, or you have political speech that's abhorrent in the public square, I don't have to go to your bakery. I can choose to boycott you. And that's perfectly legal because that's my speech. My speech and how I exercise what I do with my money is to say, I disagree, and you know what? You have an opinion I don't like, and I have an opinion about that.
Right.
By the way, I've personally never boycotted somebody who I disagreed with because I don't like boycotts. I don't think people should be punished because they disagree with me. So I'm deeply ensconced in the idea that as despicable as a person's opinion, I'll never want to boycott. And so I've watched people boycott different groups, and I've tried to lead counter boycotts because I just think that punishing people for their thoughts is un-American. It's un-American. And then we'll all start to just punish each other. And then suddenly we'll start to walk into business and say, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about this? And next thing you know, I've just ruined a perfectly good meal.
Right.
At one of my favorite restaurants. And by the way, there's a restaurateur in town whose ideas I find utterly deplorable. And he trots them around endlessly, not caring about anyone's opinions about his opinions. And by the way, he would boycott me in a New York minute. But I would never boycott him.
Right.
Because he runs terrific restaurants. And I want to honor his right to free speech, even if he wouldn't honor mine.
You wrote a letter, well, a couple of them, to some people. One was Jimmy Kimmel, and the other one was Meryl Streep. You want to talk about those for just a second?
Sure. Those became absolutely viral. I wrote them for LifeSet, a big website, a cultural website. And the letter to Meryl Streep, I think when people talk about to and about people they disagree with, they become utterly mean to them, and you're never going to reach them. And so I started off, dear Meryl, I've admired you since the first time I saw you in a Woody Allen movie, Manhattan. You were beautiful. You were smart. You had something that I'd never seen before on the screen. I loved the range, you playing Karen Silkwood and imagining what it would be like to be her. What you did with Margaret Thatcher was amazing. You didn't agree with her politically, but you captured her spirit beautifully. You were absolutely beautiful. You were generous. And here's the most important thing, Meryl. You were empathetic. But I'll tell you the role I love the most. What you did in The Devil Wears Prada. And you taught us all that a woman who may not be likable, who may not be very nice, who may even be really tough and wretched on her employees, runs a really great magazine. And then all the people who worked around her learned a lot from her. We've all had people in our lives. I mean, we did an hour on General Patton. Not a nice guy.
No.
But boy, do I want him leading the troops to Berlin, don't I?
Yeah.
You betcha I do. And so then I turned the tables and I said, which is why I was so surprised and so hurt at your diatribe against Donald Trump at the Academy Awards. I don't know why you don't have more empathy, because you've been able to imagine that a person rough around the edges could be a really good leader of a magazine. Couldn't it be possible that a man who's rough around the edges, tweets you don't like, and does all kinds of things, that maybe he could turn around this economy for the American people and do the number one thing he can do, which is to provide for people in this country? You may not like his style or this stuff, but where are your empathetic powers, Meryl? Moreover, Meryl, I've always adored you as an actress, but why are you being rude to me? We've invited you into our homes, and you've basically said to me or anybody else who voted for one particular politician, you're stupid. And then they all giggled and cackled as she made fun of half of the country. How did it happen, Meryl, that you had developed this insensitivity being such a sensitive actress? And I said, I want to just say I'm rooting for you, hoping that you see the error of your ways, and I can't wait to see your next movie. Your fan forever, Lee.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a response. I sent it to her agent, and I'm not surprised, because at this point she's in a little bubble, which allows her to be rude to people. That's how I think about the guys on the taking the knee, and it's ultimately why I had to write to Jimmy Kimmel. It was the same thing. I've watched his career, I've enjoyed his career, and all of a sudden he's doing what Johnny Carson never did in 30 years. I never knew what Johnny's political opinions were. I'm sure he had them. But he said, that's not my job. And it's not fair for me to be invited into a person's house, and then you come into the house and you go, hey, your house looks really crummy. Can't stand the way your wife looks, and oh my goodness, the roast is just atrocious. And by the way, don't ever invite me again. I mean, who comes into someone's house and does that? So what I really wanted to say to all of these folks is you're just being damn rude. There are good people who just disagree with you. You could be wrong. Have you contemplated that, Professor Kimmel?
Yeah.
Your mastery of political science being what it is, you're able to predict outcomes about the goodness or not, or lack thereof, of a guy who's running the country. Lots of good people are really bad leaders, and some pretty yucky people can be really good leaders. Can you wrap your head around that? Do you know some actors who were great actors and really yucky? And do you know some really good people who were really crummy actors? I knew them. Let's get real, Jimmy. Why are you doing this? Because now I'm having a harder time laughing at your jokes because you've insulted me every other minute. So I don't understand these things, but yet I don't think anger and bile is the way to get at these guys. I did the same with Steph Curry when he sort of insulted, the president. I mean, look, I didn't like it when anybody insulted Barack Obama that way. It's just, you're invited to the White House because you won a championship. Go. Everybody's always gone.
I know it.
You don't think there were a bunch of athletes who didn't vote for Barack Obama and didn't like him? They didn't go, I just can't stand him. He's a socialist and he's socializing medicine. None of the, and by the way, so many athletes are conservative. None of them did it. None of them, because it's rude.
It's the White House.
It's the White. Respect the tradition. We have very few left, and it's not about you. It's not about you. And you have plenty of other places to register your public protests. Be a man. Be a grown-up, and teach your kids how to agree to disagree with some traditions. Can we do that? Just that one.
Yeah.
So.
Agree. You touched on the president's Twitter account.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's yelling for his account to be disabled and all this. If this social media had been available in the past, do you think other presidents would have used it also?
No, I don't. I think this president, I think even some of us who voted for him and voted not necessarily for him because he was our favorite person, but because there were some things, particularly the Supreme Court and basic tax policy that we just fundamentally knew he would advance, and we knew his opponent wouldn't. So it wasn't necessarily a vote for him, but a vote for maybe a couple of policies. But no, I don't. I actually think that he doesn't know restraint well enough. And it's something I've never liked, is that he doesn't know how to restrain himself. We're going to ask kids to restrain themselves and grown-ups to restrain themselves. Well, you don't have to comment on everything. Part of leadership is leading and bringing in as many people as possible. including people who may not have voted for you and they don't like you. By the way, I think Barack Obama did a very terrible job of this too. He made fun of certain media, and that was Fox News, and no one ever talked about that because the rest of the media didn't like Fox News, and so now Trump's making fun of CNN. Oh my goodness, the horror. I don't know, well, where were you when Barack Obama was making fun of Fox News? Barack Obama did a lot of the same things. He did things that no president had ever done before. But I think Donald Trump has actually taken it to new heights with what he's done with his Twitter account. Obama never did that stuff. I think he had a little more respect for the office. And though I fundamentally disagree with him, I think he respected the office more than President Trump. And I wish he would stop tweeting. I don't think it helps him. I don't think it serves him or his candidacy. And if he was tweeting pithy little nice thoughts every day about things, I'd say maybe, oh, look, so-and-so did such and such. Or, I mean, how we use Twitter is another thing, but he's constantly attacking almost anybody who he perceives to have a grievance with. And I wish that weren't a part of his fundamental character. But then again, I wish all kinds of things that don't exist. I think in the end, I think the performance of the stock market, the performance of the economy, you talk to most business owners, and this is a business, and we all really like where the policies are headed. Corporate taxes are now going to be in line with the world's corporate taxes. And this isn't a tax break for these big, rich companies. I like to tell young people all the time, if you don't think corporations aren't people, and by the way, the Supreme Court ruled corporations are people. How could the court have ruled that? Well, let's think about that. Who runs corporations? Who works at those corporations? Who pays taxes? Corporations pay taxes, citizens pay taxes, the citizens who fuel the salaries from those corporations pay the taxes, and where does government money come from? But from corporations. Okay. Little corporations, big corporations. The corporation is a tremendous invention. Without the corporation, we don't have a country, let alone a tax base. So I love to tell my friends on the other side of the aisle, where do you propose we get all that money for all the programs you dream of? Right. But for the yucky corporation. And if our corporations can make more money and employ more people, we'll expand our tax base. And if we make it so that our corporations have to pay more in taxes than their foreign competitors, well, don't be surprised when we move companies overseas. And by the way, we're seeing it in America. People are moving from state to state because of tax policy.
Right.
And Texas is the fastest growing state in the country. Oh my goodness, no state sales tax. What a surprise. Right. And states with really high state sales taxes are losing people. This is really remarkable. Well, of course, capital is going to try and find out where it can get its best returns. We all do this every day with our own capital. Right. We look at prices. We don't go, oh my goodness, this product costs more and it's not as good. I think I'll buy that because it's going to employ more people. Who says that? Nobody. We're looking for the best product, the best service. People are going to start to look at states that way and countries. Whoever treats capital the best, human capital and capital is going to win. And this is indisputable. And we've got to figure that out as a country. And in particular on the education front, I think it's the biggest issue in America is how do we educate our kids? And there's got to be a better way than the way we're doing it. It's really expensive and it ain't working. And I think the online education revolution is about to start. And I can't wait because the monopolies now that control education, the four-year colleges, the K-12 schools, and all the money that it represents, and all the power it represents, and all the votes it represents, and all the political ads and spending it represents, are about to be threatened by parents who go, you know what, this online package is really good, and I got 5 or 6 other parents, think I'm going to homeschool.
Right. I was fixing to say it.
I think I'm going to homeschool. And by the way, don't you even think about not letting my kid play on that sport team for the taxes I'm paying at that public school. Mm-hmm. You're not going to go punish me. Those are my tax dollars. So I'm just, things have been the way they are for a long time, but that doesn't mean they're staying that way.
Right.
And life changes, and the only thing that hasn't changed at all is our K-12 schools. They feel and act and look almost the same way they did 100 years ago. They're sorting kids by age. This makes no sense. They're moving them around at 50 minutes at a time, because that's what they do. And then they advance them at a certain speed and pace. No idea why. And these kids go online and they're homeschooling and poof, they're moving 3 grade levels in a year. Mm. And I'm not just talking about affluent kids. I'm talking about what's happening with inner city kids, rural kids. This online stuff is miraculous, and it allows almost any group of parents to then not be experts in physics, but they've got this great physics teacher now teaching physics in a place where there weren't physics teachers. So there are places in this country that didn't have a physics teacher in their zip code, and then are piping them in through online education. And they're good physics teachers. And who cares if they're in the... You think these kids even care if the teacher is physically present anymore? The way they engage? Is the instruction quality there? And then can the parent then support and make sure the kid's doing their work? Right. You don't need to be a physics teacher to get the kid engaged with a really good physics teacher and their homework. And so I think this is about to happen in this country. And when it really reaches its full fruition, the K-12 education establishment and the colleges, their neck is going to snap, and they're not going to know what hit them. But the cost of these public colleges, I mean, Ole Miss, what it costs now, and where it's looking like it's heading, it's not acceptable to say to middle-class families, oh, we need $25,000 a year for each of your kids, going straight to 30. Where do they think that money's coming from? And why aren't they able to cut their prices as they add more administrators, and they can't figure out a way to lower their costs where everybody else in the country's had to figure out how to do that with newer and more sophisticated technology. So I think these schools just keep doing what they do. They keep saying, we just want more, we just want more, woe is me, we want more. And at a certain point, the taxpayers are going to go, we don't have any more. We're finished.
Yeah.
You have now priced us right out of the market, and we're going to come up with some options that you're not going to be very happy about because you were not listening to us.
Right.
You thought we were stupid. You told us we didn't understand. And here's the worst part about it. You didn't think we had any other options. Well, we do, and we're about to exercise them. I'm warning every college chancellor in this country, be careful. Unless your college is great, be careful. So, that's going to be something I really look forward to. I think the parents of this country deserve options. And, we almost returned to the past where we had a bunch of kids in the school, different ages, teaching each other. I mean, we managed all these years and all these centuries. And with the technology, I mean, some of the software I'm seeing in some of the programs, I have a niece down near Philadelphia, and the school it was so bad that all the local moms said, we got to do something. So they got together, wired a VFW hall with the internet, and got a K-12 digital program, and then some supplemental materials. The kids are killing. I mean, they're advancing. I mean, where they are in their development is remarkable. Where they are in their self-esteem, because they're not getting bored. They're moving along at the pace of each kid. Right. My little girl's going crazy. Oxford's such a good school, but she's already finished. She's like, I'm done, and now I got to sit there and stare at the wall. If she's online, she's moving to the next. And if she's stuck, well, let's work on her being stuck. So the slow kids get punished, the fast kids get punished, the kids in the middle get punished, because the teacher's teaching 30 kids at a time. That makes no sense in the 21st century. None. I for the life of me, I don't understand it. And it's really hard to teach 25, 30 kids at a time. My dad did it for a long time. He goes, this is really hard. If I were in charge of a school, I'd have each of the kids in front of a computer with a personalized teacher, personalized instruction plan, and I'd be moving around that class, moving those kids along at their own individual paces. And then one 12-year-old might be at the 15-year-old level in one thing, 11-year-old level in another thing, and we got to look at the kid individually. And that sometimes the 12-year-old is in the 16-year-old level in math and the 11th grade in English. Well, how do you do that in a regular brick and mortar school? You can't. You can't schedule it. It's too impossible. I feel their pain. But they will resist forever the idea of an online instructor. They'll just resist it. And I get it. I understand it. But changes are coming. And it's not that you're bad or change is good. It's just coming. It's like if you were a smith and you worked on horses. God bless that you had a really good job working on horseshoes. But we're moving to cars. You got to come along with us. Just come along with us. Get some retraining. But we're not going to create special protection for the guys who make, horseshoes. We got a new world. Come live in it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so that's what I'm very optimistic about. I'm one of the rare people of my age bracket who's extremely optimistic about the millennials, about the young people I meet at Ole Miss. They're terrific. It's the institutions that are messed up around them, but they're terrific. And I've never met kids that are smarter, more engaged, know more, have seen more. And the things they don't know are things like American history. They know a lot of these other things. I wish they knew more about the core things that make the country great and more work on their characters. And I think not enough people are doing character education, which when I hire here, I've got 10 employees now. That's the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 thing I hire for. I can't teach character. Everything else I can teach. Everything. But I cannot teach people how to work hard, put in a good day, and not blame their workmate when they made a mistake. I need them to come to me and say, I made the mistake. It's my fault and I'm sorry and I'm going to fix it. I need to hire people like that. We all need to hire people like that. We all need to have people like that in our lives. We're not teaching that stuff anymore. Right. And that's why we used to teach the literature. What we were doing when we taught the literature is the books and the stories we picked revealed character. That's why we chose them, not because they were the greatest pieces of literature, but because they had an instructional element to them. And then people wanted to emulate the characters in those stories and then imitate those characters in those stories. What a crazy idea to put really beautiful characters in front of us so that our kids could become beautiful people. we're not thinking about that anymore. Not thinking about that at all. So good news on that front. I think the online world is about to overtake the brick and mortar world. And education, of course, was going to be the last holdout, because the last thing they want to do is change anything.
Right.
All they want are pay increases and more money and a new bond. And that's always the answer to everything. More money.
How can people find our stories?
Sure. Our American Stories can be found by just, if you go up on the web and just go to ouramericannetwork.org, or just type in Our American Network, up will come Our American Stories, our network's first show. And all the content's there. It's also all on iTunes, everything we do. And then it's in categories, so you can read different, if you like history, or this days in history are there. And we got about 250 hours that are finished on this day in history, and then all kinds of other stories: leadership, sports, songs. We do a segment called The Story of the Song, which is the story of how a song came to be. We just did one yesterday on the story of David Bowie and Bing Crosby's Peace on Earth, Little Drummer Boy. It's a fantastic story about how that song came to be and what that recording session was like. And we get some people who were on the ground at the time, some producers, and it turns out Bing Crosby, his kids loved David Bowie. David Bowie's mother loved Bing Crosby, and but for those things, these two guys would have never gotten together. Right. And then how they met, the circumstances they met, it's actually quite amusing. But when they sat down at that piano, all the differences between these two men, one a Brit, one an American, one a traditional American wearing cardigan sweaters, the other, let us just say, very untraditional, dressed in, at the time when he walked into the set, red hair, an earring, a mink coat, full-length mink coat, and no one could really tell whether he was the man or the girl he was with was the woman, because David Bowie is a very androgynous character at the time. That was in his Ziggy Stardust period and right after. And there are these two people from two different planets, and the joy of music is that it can bring two absolutely oddball characters in each other's eyes together and on the same page for just a moment, and a beautiful moment. And we capture that and tell that story, and it's about a 12-minute story, and stuff like that's all over our site. Once you start listening, you'll become addicted.
And talking about music, one of the stories I heard you tell one time is about how White Christmas, you were talking about that, about the writer of that.
Yeah, we did an hour on the life of Irving Berlin, because Irving Berlin came to America from Russia, and actually his village was burned to the ground because he was Jewish. And he came to America, and there was anti-Semitism, but nobody burned villages to the ground here in America. He had to deal with a little bit of hate speech and some people who didn't like him because he was Jewish. But what a difference between what was happening in that former country. And then he gets to America poor, and his father dies when he's 8. So now he has to become an earner in the family. So he starts to work at the age of 8, and he develops singing skills as a waiter, a singing waiter. And it turns out he has this musical talent. He starts to write songs. And Irving Berlin wrote more standards than anyone, probably in American musical history. He also owned his own songs, which was one of the rarity at the time. Most musicians didn't own their intellectual property. He did. He was very wealthy when he died, and came here with nothing, and no language. Nothing. But most importantly about Irving Berlin is he was Jewish, but he wrote White Christmas because he loved that a nation of mostly Christians would take a Jew in and allow him to prosper the way he did. And that was a remarkable thing to him. And that so many Christians were kind to him. I mean, some were mean to him because he was Jewish. But again, so many were kind. And so that's fascinating that a Jew wrote White Christmas, and a Russian wrote God Bless America, because he also wrote God Bless America.
Right.
And again, only in America could a Russian write God Bless America and a Jew write White Christmas, and he's the same person.
Right.
And gets celebrated for that. And so we love that story. Every year on the day of his birth and his death, that hour gets run. And it has, experts who studied Irving Berlin, his music, Tony Bennett talking about his music, modern Willie Nelson talking about his music, as Willie Nelson recorded Stardust, and it became a hit for him 50 years after it was recorded. That's the staying power of Irving Berlin, that not only did it last that long, but that a guy from Nashville will record this New Yorker's music. Right. And turn it into country music. And it has that kind of depth and legs that it's such a sturdy, good song. It can be exported into different musical idioms and still resonate lyrically and musically all those years later. And it's one of Willie's favorite songs, tells you, and it's testimony to the power of Irving Berlin songwriting, because Willie, people don't know it, but Willie is a hell of a songwriter and wrote some of country's greatest standards for other people, including Patsy Cline. So great, we love telling the stories about music. I would say 10% of our stories are about American music.
Thank you so much, Lee, for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, anytime.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed all the stories that you told and just listening to you.
Well, happy to do it.
And we will be watching for some of your articles and definitely telling people about your podcasts and everything that's coming up. Thank you so much for joining us here today on From the Heart, Mr. Lee Habeeb and North Mississippi's TV 99.